topic tonight is Big Brother, Blood Money and the Deep State. Big Brother is watching you. Blood money and no questions asked. And the Deep State, smaller and bigger than you think. I'm Kathy Bogan, committee member and digital producer of this event. I'm usually behind the camera, thank you Jan, but I needed 2 more hands to bring you this exciting show with a live link up to Dr. Nozomi Hayase in the United States and our very own Bernard Keane. Please give a warm welcome to our speakers. Born in Japan, Nozomi Hayase is an American writer, columnist, researcher and First Amendment advocate. She is a former contributing writer to Wikileaks Central and has been covering issues of free speech, transparency and the vital role of whistleblowers in global society. Her writing has appeared on diverse outlets such as Counterpunch, Common Dreams, Dissident Voice, Truth Out, Global Research, Anti-War, Greenhaven Press, Pearson Education and Autonom Universität Berlin. Nozomi is currently a guest writer at Faltwinger and Company on info policy, where she explores the role that Bitcoin and other decentralized platforms play in strengthening civil liberties.
Hello everyone. First of all, thank you for your invitation. It's an honor to participate in this event. And thank you, Cassie, for arranging this. It's been 2 years since Snowden's revelation of NSA mass surveillance. Thanks to his courageous whistleblowing, we now know the US intercepts and stores almost all of our communication. This blanket surveillance is just the tip of the iceberg, and our programs go much deeper. There's a famous quote from George Orwell's 1984 that you all may know. Those who control the present control the past. Those who control the past control the future. Throughout history, we have seen these hidden forces of oppression continue in different forms. Today, I would like us to step back and see the larger picture behind the machinery of this surveillance. I will explore its roots in the context of current power structures of Anglo-American dominance, and during the discussion, we can talk more about ways to meaningfully challenge it. From Chelsea Manning to Edward Snowden, waves of whistleblowers in recent years have shed light on the illegality and abuse of both governments and corporations. Wikileaks Editor-in-Chief Julian Assange spoke of the effect of this whistleblowing. He said, "We are walking around constantly in this fog where we cannot see the ground. These disclosures are a break in the fog." We are beginning to see the existence of the deep state, an unchecked agency that operates outside of law or oversight. Some call it the corporate state. It is a network of collaborative secrecy run by some of the richest people working behind corporations who are not democratically elected. We've seen concrete examples in corporate globalization with trade agreements such as NAFTA, WTO, and now secret deals like TPP, which are presented as free trade, but are actually a huge giveaway to corporations. This state within the state is not bound by any single jurisdiction and has no allegiance to any country or political party. The deep state does not trust us and often sees us as a threat. The NSA discharge-like privacy invasion is a clear indication of this. So what is spying really? The dictionary defines it as working for a government or other organization by secretly collecting information about enemies. So this mass surveillance indicates that in the eyes of the NSA, no matter where we live, we are all viewed as enemies of the state. It is so telling how rhetoric such as traitor was used by the US government to intimidate Assange even though he's not a US citizen. They even tried to prosecute him under the Espionage Act. The fact that the US government even treats its own citizens as potential enemies shows that it's not a government based on the consent of the governed. And when the Australian government does not stand up against US dominance and instead collaborate with their operations, they also become a part of this unaccounted power. For instance, just take a look at a program like PRISM, also known as the Five Eyes Alliance, in which Australia engages in gathering information on almost everyone in secret, along with New Zealand, Canada, United States, and Britain. Constitutional democracy and the US free speech tradition shifted the source of legitimacy from the rule of kings to the rule of law. Now it seems the divine rule of transnational corporations, backed by corrupt government, is regressing our society into a new kind of monarchy. So who is king in this global security state? After the Revolutionary War, the United States attained independence from the king and the Bank of England. Yet this fight for freedom was, in a sense, lost with a secret creation of the US Federal Reserve in 1913. The control of money was taken out of the hands of the people and governments and instead given over to private banks. As oil became the engine that runs the global economy, whoever controlled the flow of oil came to control global geopolitics. The 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement gave the US dollar world reserve currency status. The dollar became a kind of king, dictating the world with decree from above. Now, every time this money is issued, it creates debt, imposing a fabricated interest obligation on the people. We can see examples with multinational entities like the IMF and the World Bank, which were created under the pretense of reducing global poverty, but have actually worked for the super rich and the corporations to extract resources from the global south through debt. The dollar is backed by men with guns. Keep in mind, every country that refused to accept the petrodollar hegemony has been hammered. Recall the invasion of Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, sanctions on Iran, and now the bombing of Syria that is creating a mass migrant crisis. Dollar hegemony that is at the center of this global financial system has turned the money into blood. As a hidden hand of the deep state, it began to eat at the heart of democracy around the world. Unlike the overt dictatorship and conquest by force we've seen in the past, the shadow governance of modern times uses the perception of democracy for control. The deep state derives its power from the perceived of consent of the governed. Behind secrecy and complexity, these unelected bureaucrats engage in trivial and sensational journalism, hiding their real actions with a web of mass deception. This process was perfected through public relations. Though it sounds like a credible communication mechanism, it was actually designed as a propaganda machine. This technique to influence public opinion was developed by Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, through his study of Freud's analysis of the unconscious mind. Bernays learned that by appealing to unknown desires and emotions, one can control people without them knowing it. We can see how this thought control was used historically, from engineering consent for American participation in World War I to helping tobacco companies sell cigarettes to women. It was even taken up by Hitler's right-hand man, Goebbels, to brainwash Germans during the Nazi regime. So where has this taken us? This hidden private bank monopoly over money and corporate control of media is an assault on our basic rights of free speech and association. Now information no longer circulates as the currency of democracy. In the West, free speech itself seems to have become doublespeak, meaning we think we are free while we are actually being controlled. The corruption of the monetary system and control through debt reached a new height after Nixon took the United States off the gold standard in 1971. With this unlimited money supply, central banks distorted value and promoted ideas of infinite growth. Radical deregulation during the Reagan-Thatcher era allowed investors to prop up the virtual reality of Wall Street speculative bubbles. Economy became synonymous with finance. The result has been a Goldman Sachs-style takeover of world economy. To see the consequences, just look at the 2008 financial meltdown and the recent Greek debt crisis. So how does this mass surveillance fit into all of this? Unwarranted wiretapping is justified as national security, yet it has nothing to do with security. And indeed, it had more to do with profit motives to help US corporations gain economic advantage. Snowden's disclosures revealed the symbiotic relationship between private companies and governments. The surveillance that we are seeing now is another merger between governing functions and market forces. Companies have been collecting data for commercial purposes. Now corporations that hijacked and direct government behind the scenes are collecting data for political control. The infrastructure for this spying was already in place. All they had to do was turn the key. This interception is the next level of social engineering. With the advent of consumer culture, whole populations became vulnerable to mass marketing with invasive prying into our deepest desires and fears. Now everything is going digital and we all have become subject to US surveillance by tech companies like Facebook, which has now become a global spying machine. This industrial surveillance is a continuation of the war against the free flow of information and is a further assault on freedom of speech. Many talk about unauthorized spying in relationship to protection of privacy in the US Constitution and Article 12 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Yet, privacy directly concerns the right to free speech. Without privacy and the option to be anonymous in our communications, there is no true free speech. So what drives this crusade for American exceptionalism in the form of managed democracy? If we look carefully, we find a particular mentality and vision of governance. Bernays believed propaganda could be used to promote peace. He held the view that elite are the best judges of public interest, and the ignorant masses need to be governed by those who are more qualified. What underlies this is a disdain toward ordinary people. Now this authoritarian style of governance is being enacted through the internet. Carrying the torch for the deep state are companies like Google. Just like the NSA, whose motto is collect all, this search giant has become an arm of the US State Department, collecting all information it can and sharing it with the state. Assange warned how the internet, our greatest tool for emancipation, has been transformed into the most dangerous facilitator of totalitarianism. The battle over time revolves around the question of who defines this new digital age. So what can we do about it? How can we dismantle this surveillance complex? First, we must look at the seeds of corruption found within the very structure of modern governance. The system of representation, both the American constitutional republic and the Australian parliamentary system, relies on trust in central authority, those who claim to represent people in the form of elected officials. This is third-party trust, which has very different implications than trust among peers. For instance, trusting one's fellows is based on relatively equal relationships, where risks and responsibilities are more mutually shared. Trust placed in intermediaries, on the other hand, makes appeal to authority necessary. This creates levers of control that can be abused. Historically, to mitigate abuse of this trust, designers of representative democracy implemented systems of checks and balance of power as safeguard. Unprecedented levels of institutional and government corruption have brought a near total breakdown of this system of accountability. What are the security holes in this third-party trust that allow this to happen? Perhaps an answer to this riddle can be found within. Most of us are bound by empathy. Emotions that arise from the communal ground, such as compassion, guilt, or a sense of remorse, naturally regulate self-interest and restrain actions in considerations of others' need. But here there is a problem. Much of our current social dilemma stems from the fact that there is a sector of humanity devoid of conscience and are not governed by these internal laws of empathy. Most of us are naturally trusting and give others the benefit of the doubt. This makes mandated trust of central authority ripe for exploitation. A small percentage of society that exhibit callous and manipulative traits fake empathy to elicit trust. From Blair to Abbott and Cheney to Obama, we've been taken in by political leaders with empty promises that do not match actions. All these illegal wars, mass surveillance, and financial terrorism are an indication of a security breach. Now third-party based governance has been taken over by blood-sucking parasite with concentrated greed and self-calculating speculation moving the world toward a turnkey tyranny. We are surrounded by the lies of those who lost their ability to feel, and we are all kept in a fog, not able to see what's really happening. We have now been transported into an Orwellian nightmare where war becomes peace, ignorance is strength, and de facto death slavery is treated as freedom. When the social contract is broken, people must revolt. British philosopher John Locke once said. When trust in the foundation of society is broken, the force of accountability has to come from outside of the system. The deep state can only be challenged by recognizing the deep ties of our own humanity that transcend artificial barriers of the nation state. The building blocks of a free society are arising from the web. An online mailing list called Cypherpunks advocated the social application of cryptography to ensure rights of free speech and association by deploying anonymity technology. Wikileaks is a good example of this applied cryptography as non-violent direct action. Backed by encryption technology, the whistleblowing site opened up channels for people to break out of oligarchic control. Anonymous communication made it possible for truth tellers to become invisible to the eyes of Big Brother and act as private citizens, not simply agents or victims of the deep state. As information was freed, currency began to move. The emergence of Bitcoin is a further evolution of the cypherpunks. Many of you may know this invention as cryptocurrency, as a new form of decentralized digital money. Yet it is much more than just currency. The blockchain's underlying technology is a public asset ledger that provides a platform for decentralized consensus at a large scale. It was indeed invented as a solution to the inherent weakness of third-party trust. Just as Wikileaks freed the First Amendment from US corporate propriety and distributed it to the world, Bitcoin enables the First Amendment as free transaction beyond borders. It gives people tools to bypass central banks' control over money, making it possible for all to financially associate with one another without permission. We are now seeing the beginning of a new model of governance, one that is open and transparent, an alternative to the systems of representation and outdated checks and balance of power. On the net, collaboration to build distributed systems is growing. For instance, the project Made Safe is an effort to create a decentralized internet free from censorship and surveillance. The corporate state automates surveillance, violence, and domination by making these methods of fear and control a default in the system. Through coding the ideal of consensus into new forms of law, we can enshrine democratic values of privacy, civil liberties, and universal human rights as unshakable foundations of a global society. We are the chaos that occurs at the moment of a conception at the birthing of a true democracy. Those who wish to control us try to govern us from top down, but they cannot ever claim the creative force of we the people from which they derive their power. With organized networks of our uncompromising power, we can dismantle this illegitimate governance. We can take back the present, restore the past, and by doing so, create a future based on the consensus of all people. Thank you.